When an administrative regulation and a statute seemingly conflict, courts use the Chevron test to determine whether to give deference to a federal agency's regulatory interpretation. The Supreme Court put a Department of Education regulation to the test in Zuni Public School District No. 89 versus Department of Education. The Impact Aid Program awards federal funds to public school districts financially burdened by a federal presence in the local community. Under the statute, a state mustn't reduce state funding for schools that receive federal money unless the state equalizes spending among its school districts. To determine whether a state meets this exception, the Department of Education must compare spending per student among a state's school districts. First, the department must disregard the school districts with per-student expenditures above the 95th percentile and below the 5th percentile. This is called the disregard instruction. If the disparity between the remaining highest and lowest spending school districts doesn't exceed 25%, the state can reduce state funding for schools that receive federal money. In 1976, the department created a regulation that provides steps for calculating the equalization exception. This regulation applies the statute's disregard instruction by ranking school districts from highest to lowest spending per student and then eliminating the districts that cumulatively make up 5% of the state's student population at each end of the list. Then the department compares the remaining districts' expenditures to measure disparity. In the year 2000, the department applied this regulation and determined that New Mexico equalized spending. Consequently, Zuni Public School District lost some state funding and sought administrative review. Zuni argued that the department's regulation incorrectly interpreted the statute's disregard instruction. According to Zuni, the department should have disregarded the top and bottom 5% of school districts in the ranked list instead of disregarding school districts that made up 5% of the state's student population at each end of the list. In other words, the department disregarded 10% of the state's student population, but it should have disregarded 10% of the state's school districts without regard to their size. Zuni lost the administrative review and appealed to the 10th Circuit, which affirmed. Zuni appealed to the Supreme Court.